Today on HooptieDoodle's Goldwing Bobber Build series, we customize a bottle, we exercise our foot, and find a new use for a screwdriver. And so I've got some brake fluid, and then I like to make a little catch can, and I'm going to recycle this bottle here from our tank liner, and I'm going to drill a hole in it, put that tube in it, and we'll use that tube to attach to the brake caliper and drain fluid into there, and it'll be nice and neat.
Screw, put the cap on there, attach my hose directly to the bleeder screw. There's a little 8mm.
Alright, so I'm almost finished with this bike. I'm just trying to put together the fluids and put everything back together. I started doing the brakes, and then I got to the rear brake and I had a problem. So I can pump the brake pedal all day long and it never builds up any pressure. There's fluid in the reservoir here, and everything is tightened down, everything is closed, but no pressure. Now I later realized that the master cylinder just had air in it and that all I needed to do was bench bleed that sucker, and I probably could have made that work. But to the benefit of the bike ultimately, and to those interested in doing this project yourself, here's a master cylinder rebuild and a brake caliper rebuild. So the master cylinder for the rear brake is right here. We got the reservoir is right there, and there's two bolts that hold this guy on here. So we'll remove these guys. Now below the master cylinder, down here, it connects to the brake pedal via a little cotter pin, and then another pin that runs through the pedal and the master cylinder itself. And a little washer behind the cotter pin, and this bolt should slide out. Alright, and now we've got the bolt holding the reservoir on. Take that guy off. Then coming around to the other side of the bike, we've got the brake caliper. I'm going to take this off as well and rebuild this also. So here we've got a 12 and a 14mm bolt. Actually, this one doesn't need to come out. That's my bad. All right, now we just have a couple little clips along the way here to remove to get this brake line out. And there it is, our entire rear brake system. Let's go rebuild it. All right, so I still got fluid in the reservoir here and in this system, so let's go ahead and drain this and start taking things apart. So there's that, and then for new parts, I've got some stuff here, some rebuild kits. I've got a rebuild kit for the master cylinder and a rebuild kit for the rear brake caliper. Let's start with the master cylinder, see what we got here. So we've got a boot, we've got a piston, we've got a spring, we've got some oil seals, rubber seals here, and a plunger thing, it looks like rubber plunger, and then a circlip. So that's what we got. Let's see, let's take this thing apart and see what it's made of. I'm gonna start up here and remove the reservoir, which means removing this hose clamp. We're gonna take this boot off next. It's rusty in there. It looks fairly grody in there. Definitely time to rebuild this thing. So there's a little circlip right there. There's the little connections for the circlip. I'm gonna get some circlip pliers, put them on there, and take this off. So here's some circlip pliers. They should do the job here. There it is, we got it. All right. And the rest of it comes off like that. And then, man, look at all, it's just all kinds of rust in there. And there's our little piston. Dump out some more fluid here. It looks pretty dirty in there. Alright, need to take off this part here. inside there's like a little rubber stopper type thing in the bottom here, which is what the kit comes with, one of those. And I assume the spring is behind here, behind that rubber stopper somewhere. And so in order to get that out, I've taken this part off here. So you can see down in here, there's a little hole where the hydraulic fluid comes out, and I'm gonna put some compressed air in there, and hopefully that will force this little rubber stopper out. And there it is. Haha! Alright, so here's the spring, the little rubber grommet on the end of it that was in there. Alright, and then this guy, I'm gonna take the hose off, I'm gonna fully clean this up, put it in a kerosene bath, or might even paint it, and then reassemble it back together. So I've gone ahead and cleaned this guy up here. It's gone through the wire wheel and is free of rust now. And same with this guy here. Alright, so next I'm going to clean this guy up and I'm going to paint it. Here, take my tape off of it. Get the new parts out. So we've got a new spring. We've got a new circlip. We've got a new boot. This is probably called a piston of some kind. We got a new one of those. And we've got some new rubber gaskets, rubber seals here. Like a little plunger seal maybe here. And that is it. Alright, so order of assembly is basically, we've got the actual housing itself right here. So I'll put that guy over here. And then we've got the spring, and the spring gets smaller. It's wider down here and smaller up here. So the small end gets this little plunger on the end of it. That guy will go in the housing like so. And then this plunger, this guy gets a little rubber seal that goes around here. This is rubber grease. You can also use, it's a supply with the kit, but you can also use just brake fluid itself. But we want to coat this guy. Also, this seal, it's tapered. So the narrow end of the taper is up here and the wider end is down here. So we want to put so it's tapered with the narrow end on the top, on this part here. So I'm going to slide them over like this. Then we have this as our final product. And this guy should go in the tube basically like that. And this guy goes on here. And then this little circlip goes behind this plate here. And the little boot goes on top of everything like that. So here's our basic assembly order right here. And I'm going to have to go ahead and take this back off to get the little boot on there. But then that will be how everything goes back into the housing. On the little spring here, this guy has got a protrusion. This one has a protrusion coming from the center of it. This cap, this little plunger cap thing here. And you can see this one has a recess. So these go together, just like that. It's a magical moment. I'm gonna get some brake fluid and put that in here. Get it all lubed up. Swish this around real nice in here. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and put my little spring in with my plunger. And then this guy goes in. Oh yeah. Springy action. Oh yeah. You hear that? And this guy goes down on top of that. And then we jam this guy down in here. This is probably the hard part. Getting the circlip back in place while it's simultaneously holding the spring down, that'll be the fun part. Alright. That wasn't too bad. Make sure that's fully seated in there. Alright, so there's that guy assembled. Now time for the boot to go on here. And the boot should go over this, and it should fit in that little groove there. That's where the top part of the boot should fit in this groove. So let's put some rubber grease around here. Now we got it in that groove right there. And now we've got this groove down here that it also should go in. All right, look at that. Nice new boot. That's lovely. All right, and this nut goes back on here. And this little bracket. And then we've also got this guy here to go back on. So this guy's done for right now. So I'll set that aside and go ahead and take this caliper apart. Alright, so it's a matter of getting these guys out. That's what we want to do next. So, spray some penetrating oil around these guys. Alright, and these are our little pistons. They slide in and out, and so then our next step is to put some compressed air again in here. Let's stick this guy in here. Alright, so they pushed out a little bit here, but there's one. Ah, we got it. So they're both out now. These are the two pistons. Down inside there, we've got a couple O-rings. So those two O-rings come with the kit. The kit that we got, there are a couple O-rings there. There's 4 O-rings that comes with. Those are the ones that go inside there. And then we've got a couple little boots here. And we've got a new bleeder valve and some new crush washers for the connection to the hose. So take this guy apart. We'll clean it up like we did the other one. And then we'll paint it. So our first step is to get these little O-rings out. A little tiny screwdriver. I'm gonna do it this way. There's 1. There's 2. 3. 4. Take the old bleeder screw off as well. I'm gonna go ahead and wash this thing in kerosene, and then we'll clean it all off and we'll paint this as well. All right, I have cleaned these guys up, the pistons for the brakes, with a brass wire brush. And you can see there is some corrosion on these. There's some slight pitting. Very slight though. Once I clean this up with the wire brush, it really is not bad at all. So I'm gonna go ahead and reuse these pistons. Then let's get our newly painted caliper back. All right, so here's our newly painted caliper, our cleaned up pistons, and our new installation kit right here. And the meat of it here is the new seals for the pistons. All right, so how this is supposed to work is we'll put the little seals in here, and then we put the little pistons in there. And then we put our little rubber boots on these guys over here. So let's take our seals out. We should have 2 of each size. 2 of each of these guys. You can see they're different size, different diameter. Well, same diameter, different widths. The chunkier one goes in first. That's in the back part of the cylinder here. And then the skinnier one is closer to the outside of the cylinder wall here. Let's start with the chunkier one. Basically, we take some rubber grease here and coat up our seal real nice. And then this goes in. So there's our first one inside, and then we'll do the next one on top of that. That's a skinnier one. Do the same thing, coat this up real good. All right, and there's our second one in there. We got 2 in. We're gonna do the same for the other cylinder. All right, so both cylinders have the seals in them now, and our next step is to go ahead and get these pistons in here, and the pistons go in with the closed side in there. Should be obvious, but just in case you forgot. I'm gonna lube these up as well. All right, so the way I'm putting these pistons back in, and I'm sure there are better ways of doing it, but this is how I'm doing it, is I got a screwdriver. I'm putting that in the top of the piston, inside the piston there, and then I'm using that to have a better way to hold on to this thing and balance it and align it, and then we're forcing it down that way. Alright, next we've got this little guy here that goes in this spot right in here. And it has two little boots on the side of it. The kit comes with 3 boots. These are the 2, it comes with 3. These are the 2 that are the same. The third one goes to something else, and so these guys go on this one here. Basically the way they should go on is like this on either side. So it's like that, but this top part here goes all the way down, so it fits into that groove right there. Go ahead, grease this up. Stick this guy on there. Alright, and then some more grease on this sucker. Stick it in here. And then stick this guy on the other side. That's now installed on there. And this moves back and forth just slightly. And that's where the bolt goes through. That's where this bolt here goes through this guy and attaches it to the bike. Alright, so next we're going to install the new bleeder screw. So I'll get this guy out. I get the bleeder screw cap out as well. We're actually going to install the little bleeder cap rubber part on the bottom of this before we thread it on, and install it in such an orientation that this little cap will go swing up and over and on. So install that over here. This guy, it's very simple, just screw it in there. And I'm going to leave that just finger tight for now because we're going to be bleeding that thing in a minute to get the brakes actually going. So there's that. Our last bit is, let's see, this part right here. This is our bolt that aligns it onto the bike, and this is our final little boot goes on this thing. You can see on this bolt there's a thread, and then there's a little space right there, and that's where this little boot slots into right there. And so the boot goes on after we thread this onto the caliper though. So let's put this guy on here. Then let's take some rubber grease. Get this guy all nice and greasy. Then we take our boot, and with the small side first, stick it on here, and jam it over that little ridge onto its nice new home. Look at that. All right, moving back over to the bike, we've got our newly rebuilt caliper here, and just going to take this. There's the alignment tab for this alignment bolt here. I'm going to stick that on there. Then I'm going to go ahead and get my brake pads in there. I got my brake pads here and my brake pad pins to hold them in. All right, so these go in from the front. These pins, the little recessed groove here goes on the back side. And these get held in with this little retainer here. Basically that little groove, it fits in like so, and then this slides down and slots into that groove, and that holds that in there. So I'm going to start with my brake pad, the one on the front. All right, then I get my second brake pad in there on the back side. Retainer, stick that in here. Then we slide these guys all the way through that retainer on the back side, and then the retainer slots down over the top of those, and then the bolt goes back in here and secures everything in place. Snug that on there, and now I can go ahead, tighten this guy on here, screw the caliper actually onto the caliper support here. Tighten that guy down. Now our brake caliper is on there the way it's supposed to be. All right, before I put the brake line in, I want to install the master cylinder on this side of the bike. So here's this guy. I'm going to start with this end and attach it back to the pedal. All right, so we've got the pedal down here, that little chrome piece sticking out. And that's got a slot in it. And in that slot goes this little pin. And we've got our cotter pin on the end of that pin and a little washer. I'm going to take this apart, take the cotter pin out, take that washer off. So all I've got is this pin left. And then this guy just very simply slides over that. The pin slides through the whole assembly. The washer goes on the end of that, whoa. The washer goes on the end of that pin, and then the little cotter pin goes through the little hole on the end of that other pin. And then we bend the cotter pin back in place. There. Bend the cotter pin over so that secures it from falling out. All right, so now our master cylinder is attached to our brake lever. So we got 2 bolts, this guy. We got these 2 bolts here, and install the first one. And the second one, I want to thread through my ground wire right here. All right, so my next move is to route in the brake line. So on this brake line, there are 2 ends, and one end is bent at a greater angle than the other end. The more bent one goes on the caliper. All right, so on this attachment here with this banjo bolt, I want this guy to come in, attach like that, and then there's 2 crush washers here, the copper crush washers. One goes on first on this side, and then we thread it through the little banjo fitting. We put the copper washer on the other side, so it's like that. And then we thread it on to the caliper. Then we go ahead and attach it on the master cylinder side over here. We do the same thing. One of these kits did not come with crush washers. I forget which one. I believe it's the one for the master cylinder. So I happen to have some extra crush washers, luckily, but that's just something to be aware of if you order them from the same place I did. We've got a little banjo bolt, put a crush washer on one side of that bolt, insert the bolt through the banjo fitting, put a crush washer on the other side, insert into master cylinder, and screw it in. Tighten it down, and that's that. Next, I still got to attach my reservoir back on here. I got my reservoir. Go ahead and attach that guy to the little nipple over here. Slide my hose clamp over the top of the nipple hose combo thing. Tighten that down. All right, so reservoir is now attached. We've got everything successfully put on here. Now I'm going to put some fluid in the reservoir. And pump the brake pedal. All right, now after a lot of brake pedal pumping, I finally got some feel on the brake pedal, and it's finally starting to pump from the reservoir out into the system. The problem here is the master cylinder gets air in it, and it doesn't allow it to suck fluid from this reservoir. And so that you have to shake out all those little air bubbles. There's another thing called bench bleeding the master cylinder, which I probably should have done before I put it in here. And that would probably make it a lot easier, which is basically the concept of trying to get as much fluid in there as possible and sort of bleed this thing out as much as possible before putting it on here. So sort of prime the master cylinder. before you hook it up to the rest of the brake system. And so I finally got it, and it's now pumping fluid through the system to the caliper, and I'm very happy. So basically over here now I've just got my little bleeder bucket here. I've got it connected to the bleeder screw, and I've got this open, and I'm pumping fluid out into there. And now I'm gonna go ahead and start bleeding it like you normally would, which means closing this guy, giving it a few pumps over here. Let it build up some pressure in that caliper. And make sure to top off my reservoir with fluid, and go ahead and open the bleeder and simultaneously push down the pedal. Hold the pedal down, close the bleeder, and repeat. Pump it up and pump it up again. Give it a few pumps. Open that bleeder, push down the pedal, close the bleeder. Basically, I repeat this until there are absolutely no air bubbles coming out of that caliper. Once you've got a nice hard brake pedal feel, and make sure everything is tightened down, and then go ahead and top off your fluid reservoir here, and you're good to go. Drive on down the road.